The controversy over a Muslim-free school, which has been described by Ofsted as dysfunctional and rated inadequate in every category, and that's less than a year after it opened. So what, if anything, does the Al Madina school tell us about the government's Free Schools project, and in particular, how free schools are supervised and regulated? Well, with me in the studio is Francis Gilbert, a teacher and author of Working the System, How to Get the Very Best State Education for Your Child. He has concerns about free schools. In our central London studio, former Downing Street advisor Sean Worth, who is now at the think tank Policy Exchange, and Sean is broadly pro-free schools. Gentlemen, good evening. Thank you both very much for coming in. Let's start with Al Madina and reaction to what's happened there, and then we'll broaden the discussion. Sean Worth, what do you make of events in Derby?
Well, I thought today was very instructive. It shows that the government will come forward. It will act very quickly if a free school, just like any other school, if a free school doesn't come up to scratch, it will step in with the regulators and make sure it will sort their problems out. Now, you know, people are trying to link a failure of one free school to the whole movement, and I think that that's completely wrong.
Well, we'll explore that in a moment. Francis Gilbert, your reaction to events in Derby?
Well, I think it exemplifies what is wrong about this policy, which has enabled special interest groups and faith groups to set up their own schools and essentially segregate their children away from the local community and actually just run things as they want. And that could be entirely unsuitable for educating children with a broad and balanced curriculum. And what we need is, you know, all of our children to be educated to a high standard, and I fear this is going to lead to really quite poor teaching standards overall and social segregation.
OK, well, you've broadened it before I did, so let me stay with you for a moment, because of England's first 24 free schools, 3/4 were rated good or outstanding. So you can't pick one out and say the system's at fault, can you?
Well, it's a very tiny proportion. I think what we know is, if we look at the equivalent in America and Sweden, that overall standards are actually lower in these so-called free schools, they're called charter schools in America, than they are actually, you know, compared with the state system. I think we know this, looking over 2 decades at America and Sweden, where they've tried this experiment. So it hasn't worked there, and we know it won't work here.
Well, we don't know it won't work here. Let me put that back, though, to Sean Worth. If you look abroad, if you look further back than in the last year of the current government here's policy, it does not work, it doesn't produce results.
They're completely different examples. But let me tell you about the principle of this country. We had a system where, frankly, there were coasting schools, there were failing schools, and unless you had the ability to go private, unless you had that cash, you were lumped with the same system. You couldn't escape it. I think this is the most transformative policy that government has had for social progress. We haven't seen enough of it yet. These free schools are already outstripping others, and I think we need more of them, not less. We need more in poorer areas in particular. I'd really like to see the government really transforming and turbo boosting the policy, because it's not about uniform standards. There should be innovation in every other sector, healthcare through to technology. New people coming in have driven faster progress than is even imaginable by the state trying to sort of arrange standards itself. We've already seen for decades that has been failing the poorest kids.
But you talk about moving more quickly. Surely one of the problems with Al Madina was that the government moved too quickly to allow that particular school to open on this basis, and within a year we've now discovered all manner of things are wrong with it.
Well, no, there's a very tough... People were criticising today that the regulators moved too quickly to come in and sort it out. There's a very tough regulatory regime. Of course, there are 174, I think, free schools that have got approval now, and one of them failing does not mean the whole movement is wrong. Look at right across the sector, there are schools failing. It's a sign of tough regulation that the government will step in and sort them out. It's not some sort of free-for-all like your gentleman said there, where anyone can set up a free school however they like.
Well, let me go back to Francis.
Very tough system.
Let me go back to Francis Gilbert on the point you raised, namely that to go back from this system, to rely on the state system, does not take us back to something that has been universally successful in the past.
Well, I think it's a mistake to say that innovation doesn't happen in the state sector. You know, I certainly know, being a teacher in my school, you know, all the teachers there are innovating in certain ways, so you can't just say that it's only happening in free schools. Secondly, I do worry that the free school movement seems to be educating the richer, wealthier students. If you look at the statistics we've got in, you know, in my own area in Tower Hamlets, there's a free school on the Isle of Dogs that takes less than 5% of children on free school meals.
But Sean Worth says he wants it to go. Sean Worth says he wants it to go
in an area, yeah, it's in a poor area, but it's got less than 5% of children on free school meals in an area which has 60% of children on free school meals. So what's happening is it's being used by a special interest group to have their children, a wealthier group of people, to have their children segregated from the rest of the community. And we know this will happen with this policy, that it leads to social segregation, quite serious, with faith groups and other types of groups just essentially migrating away from the local community, and that causes social fracture that is going to really cost our society over the long term.
Sean Worth, that's an important point, isn't it? Yes, take it to the kinds of areas that you were describing a moment ago, but if the result of taking them to that area is that they become segregated from the actual area that they're supposed to be helping, that doesn't really get us anywhere.
No, I mean, look, your guest there pretends that free schools aren't part of the community. They are the community's response to a lack of choice in their area and a lack of decent school places. We've got two big problems in this country. One is there aren't enough school places. The second is there's too little choice for the good ones. Again, free schools open that choice up to ordinary people who would never have the chance.
But one of the problems with the policies, it actually hasn't met the demand for surplus places. Is often they're in places where there's already a kind of surplus of demand, and what we need is a strategic plan from central and local government to actually deal with the rising roles in many areas, which hasn't happened yet, and a free school policy won't deal with that.
This 1970s planning is not working.
OK, gentlemen, I did sense we weren't going to have agreement here, and we haven't, but I'm afraid time has beaten us. Sean Worth, thank you very much indeed for coming on. Francis Gilbert, thank you for coming in as well. Thank you.